have to thank our sponsors. We'll talk about them a little later. We had sponsors that enabled us to rent this lovely ballroom and to supply the food that you're going to have later for lunch and coffee and things. And I told all my Blue Star moms and our associate members that if any politician wanted to speak, they could take a $5,000 sponsorship because that allowed them 3 minutes, of which prior to their speaking I would say this is not an endorsement. So I think that should be our go-to for moving forward, because that's really not what it's about. Obviously we do need the support of we do need the support of our local officials, but we don't want to hear rhetoric. We want to see action. I just want you to know that both the Suffolk County and the Nassau County Veteran Service Agency directors were invited. Suffolk County Veteran Service Agencies is the newly appointed Marcelle Lewis. She said she had a conflict and could not attend. And Nassau County Veteran Services Agency Director Ralph Esposito is in Westchester. He had a long planned engagement that he could not get away from. So they're not here. I take note of that, by the way. We do have to work with these people, so hopefully we can build a relationship, because they are usually one of the first people that our veteran community do reach out to. But they have to be held accountable. If the phone rings, I want to know what happens when the phone rings at 5:01 on a Friday. Does that mean that person has to determine that all their issues can wait till Monday morning? To me, I don't know about you, but if my daughter made a call at Friday at 5:01 and she was in crisis, that would not be acceptable to me. What about you guys? And that's part of the reason why we're here. So our next speaker, I've known for many years, and I just want you to hear a little bit about Fred Miller. Rather than list his accomplishments, it's easier to ask what Fred Miller has not done. He was born in 1932. That was just yesterday, right? Right, Fred? He grew up in Chickasha Bay. Rather than graduating high school, he joined the United States Air Force at the start of the Korean War in 1950 at the age of 17. A lot of our enlisted start at 17, 18 years old. I don't know about you, that means to me no life experiences, or very, very little. So he went to basic training in San Antonio, Texas, and then he headed to Puerto Rico for advanced training in as an Air Sea rescue medic. He attended a medical laboratory school, making his primary job as a medical laboratory technologist. He trained for SAC Special Forces and went to mission to Africa in 1952. While in the Air Force, he also finished his high school education. Good for you, Fred. So 17 years old, not even a high school graduate, and he's going off to possibly the Korean War. By 1954, he was honorably discharged from the Air Force, but his service didn't end. He went on to join the New York Air National Guard at the 106th Medical Squadron as their first sergeant, serving in the capacity until 1963. A week after his discharge from the Air Force, he was employed by Meadowbrook Hospital as the chief of parasitology. He also taught in the biology department at Farmingdale University. That place sounds familiar. During that time, he also received his associate degree and then went on to receive his bachelor's from Stony Brook University, another Long Islander. Miller retired in 1974. That was just yesterday. Okay? But he didn't stop working. He started working as a teacher at BOCES, and to add his diverse resume, he opened a pet shop in Shirley. So, lover of veterans, lover of pets, and smart. Are you single, Mark? Yeah? See, all the good ones are taken. Miller is known to be involved in everything. During the 2000s, he joined the American Legion at the Arthur H. Clune Post 1533 in Moustic Beach. There he wore many hats. He became the chaplain, board of directors, and so on. He also became a Veteran Services Officer for the American Legion at the Northport VA. He also is a member of the Rotary, Chamber of Commerce. The man is very well involved, and this is why he's here. This is a man that has been throughout the community, knows Long Island inside and out by participating in so many levels. He has published 75 publications in medical and science fields. He has numerous articles in the religious field. He contributes weekly to the South Shore Press. Are you still doing that, Fred? Yeah, still contributing weekly to the South Shore Press. And everybody here is tired, right? No, he should be tired. As a veteran, he continues to be the chairman of the Suffolk County American Legion Post-Traumatic Stress Committee and has arranged for over 100 legionnaires and auxiliary to be trained in a peer-to-peer stress management and holds meetings in 4 different churches. So Fred Miller says his job is not done. He says nothing stands in his work when it comes to helping veterans to lower the suicide rates. He has helped to date over 11 veterans from committing suicide since 2014. In 2022, he was the Grand Marshal. In 2022, he was the Grand Marshal of the Veterans Parade, obviously for his long achievement and astounding work and devotion to the veteran community. I'm going to give you Fred Miller. I think he needs a standing ovation. That is a lifetime of work that he has devoted. Thank you so much, Fred.
Thank you. George Washington observed the willingness to which our young people are likely to serve in any war, no matter how justified, shall be directly proportional to how they perceive the veterans of the earlier wars were treated and appreciated by the nation. George Washington said, if you don't take care of the veterans now, you won't have an army to follow. That's interesting. Our veteran population in Suffolk County is about 85,000 veterans. In Nassau County, it's about 50,000 veterans. Therefore, we have a lot of veterans that need help. Before getting into the problems that our veterans and military are facing, let me correct the suicide rates. The VA reports that 20 to 22 veterans commit suicide every day. However, that report includes only what is reported to them. Several states do not report the veteran suicides to the VA. But more important, most of the homeless veterans that commit suicide are not identified as veterans. Veterans are thus not counted, nor are many of the drug overdoses and that end their lives. So they have to be included, and when you do that, it brings it up to about 40 a day. We lost 65,217 troops in the wars between Vietnam and Afghanistan. However, our suicides are just at 20 a day, it's 7,300 a year. Thus, we have lost more veterans than in combat fighting. We have to increase that number, especially when the true suicide rate is much higher. I actually attended a seminar on drug problems where the medical examiner showed a picture of a man dead on the floor from a drug overdose in front of his drug counter. When he showed the counter, the drug bottles on the top of the counter were missing. The tops were missing on all the bottles. And at the end of the counter was a Vietnam veteran's hat. But the doctor did not realize the man was a veteran and that he probably committed suicide. He was the medical examiner, but he missed it. In addition, the divorce rate among veterans has increased at a large rate. Not only is morale of the military at its lowest point, but our active military suicides have increased to 150% since 2001. Seeing these figures, we need to try to figure out why and how we can help lower them. To understand this problem of the military and veterans are facing, we need to seek the cause of the problem, which strongly relates to the changes of the wars. Back in the World War I and World War II, when the troops, both sides wore uniforms. Both the enemy and us wore uniforms. The battles were in battlefields great distances apart. Thus, if someone was shot, we really didn't see them fall too far away. In World War I, many of the troops suffered shell shock. Many of those cases were traumatic brain injury from the shells exploding in the trenches. Others suffered what is known today as traumatic stress disorder, seeing those nearby being blown up and killed. In World War II, many suffered battle fatigue, which is about the same as shell shock. However, coming home from both wars, the troops were gathered up in barracks, in large groups, put on ships, and spent weeks together coming home. So they were able to talk and debrief each other, solving many of their problems. Most important, they came home as winners and heroes of the wars that they fought in. We have not won a war since World War II. Before we entered the Vietnam War, there were many civilian groups strongly against us getting involved in that war. When we started to drafting those to serve our military, many men fled the country to Canada to avoid the draft. When our forces entered the military, they faced an enemy that was not only not in uniform, but more of a guerrilla-type war, which was close battle rather than battlefield. Thus, the enemy that was shot fell right in front of them. Our troops fought in Vietnam from 1962 to 73. We simply stopped fighting and came home alone in small groups. Coming home was a disaster, as they were greeted by spit on and called baby killers. They were actually ordered not to wear their uniforms coming home. Thus, the real important thing that we need to do, needs to be done, is to teach the civilian population that the military has no choice but to follow the orders given to them, no matter what they are. If they don't, they can be put in jail or face a bad discharge, and like dishonorable discharge and being thrown out of the service. It's important to realize this draft ended in 1973. Iraq and Afghanistan war was fought from 2001 to 2021. Again, the enemy was in civilian clothes. We now included women and children willing to blow themselves up and killing our troops. They wore bombs around their waist and set them off when they mixed with our troops, or drove them with a bomb in a truck or a car and blew it up that way. Thus, this was even a closer guerrilla-type war and causing even more mental problems. However, the biggest mental problem our troops faced was when President Biden simply pulled our troops out, leaving the American civilians and a large amount of equipment and supplies behind. The troops then and now believe that this was simply an unconditional surrender. Looking back at the mental problems the military veterans face, there are two main problems. Post-traumatic stress disorder, where the post was added to the traumatic stress disorder. That happens if you have traumatic stress disorder more than a month, it becomes post-traumatic stress disorder. Military's first responders, unfortunately, the term post-traumatic stress disorder causes a stigma to the term disorder. The military and veteran and first responders are afraid to seek medical help or other help for fear of being labeled with a mental disorder. A simple solution to that is to change the term disorder to another D, like depression or disability. The veterans are afraid they will lose their jobs, be unable to get a job if labeled with a mental disorder or crazy. Even if cured, the label will not go away. So they seek self-treatment, such as alcohol and drugs or both. The symptoms of PTSD develop in the hours, days, weeks, months, even years following the exposure to the traumatic event. Those symptoms vary. They can be from anything from nightmares, flashbacks, distress, avoiding things. It gets very difficult to list all of the symptoms, but really there's an awful lot of them. And irritability, behavior, sometimes actually difficulty. It's estimated that 30% of the Vietnam veterans suffered from PTSD. Before leaving PTSD, I would like to demonstrate a small project. Please stretch out your hand and hold it out straight. One of the big problems with stress is that it gets stronger and heavier if unaided and untreated. As you can see from stretching the arm, it's getting more and more difficult to hold up. That happens also with stress in the brain. The longer you hold it out, the more difficult, stronger it gets, and the more damage it can do to you. I find a bigger problem than PTSD with our military and veterans face is moral injury. Moral injury is the damage done to one's conscience or moral values. Forgive me. Moral compass. When a person perpetrates, witnesses, or fails to prevent an act that transgresses his own beliefs and values, if you go against your conscience, that would be moral injury. Moral injury is not grouped with PTSD and is treated totally different than PTSD, although many veterans can suffer both at the same time. Again, suffering from moral injury have done and not based on what you've done and not done against what you've taught. For example, most of us were taught in the Bible, thou shalt not kill. Unfortunately, many places still teach that. That is not a commandment. The commandment is thou shalt not murder. And there's a big difference between the two. One of the things, if you explain that difference, you can actually get the veterans the help he needs. In a just war, we're taught to kill the enemy, but protect the civilian. How do you do that when the enemy is wearing civilian clothes? Again, we have a problem. And there are numerous other situations that the military is forced to do against their conscience. So even lose faith in the officers that give the order. They need to follow. Now, again, one of the things they need to understand, if they don't follow the order given by the officer, they can be put in jail or given a bad conduct discharge. With moral injury, the patient should be seen by the clergy that understands the problem and can clearly explain the differences they face. Like difficulties between killing and murder. For example, if somebody attacks you with a gun or a knife, but you get the weapon away and you kill them, what are you charged with? Self-defense. But if they kill you, what are they charged with? Murder. In Suffolk County, the American Legion has trained 105 Legionnaires and 50 auxiliary women from the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation to be able to reach out to peer-to-peer training so that these veterans suffering from PTSD and moral injury can be helped. In addition, the National VA Chaplain Foundation has a program to help so that when they come to work with us, we've had them come up and work with us and train 50 clergy so far on how to deal with the problems facing these vets. They cover the veterans suffering from PTSD. I did the training for the moral injury. To date, I have stopped 11 veterans from committing suicide who are all suffering from moral injury, and some of our Legionnaires have reported to me that they have also been able to help stop. Many veteran organizations, such as the American Legion, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the AMVETS, are also there to help their fellow veterans so you can get the help when you need it. In addition, you can gain help by clergy or calling the VA if you know somebody that shows signs of the problem. You can call the VA Medical Center or just call 988 and press 1 for help. We need to reach out to these veterans and help them, and we need to train our civilian population on how to handle the problems. Thank you.